What do the Santee really want with Earth?
Why on earth do people keep seeing light up numbers in the sky?
Which brilliant scientist is the real hero of this story?
Will Project Staircase succeed in saving the planet?
Find out as Red and Red Real Reviews gets interdimensional on what could be the next Game of Thrones style hit, Netflix's Three-Body Problem. Check it out.
Oh my God! Okay, it's happening. Everybody stay calm.
What's the procedure, everyone? What's the procedure?
Stay calm!
Ahoy, ladies! I didn't see you there. Would you guys like to set sail on this ocean of flavor with me? I'll be your captain.
I don't think we figure out exactly who we are all at once.
So it learns information about me?
Now, say my name.
Dude, if you think that's bad, go to Google Earth and type in your address.
And I knew exactly what to do, but in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
Maybe I don't want you to feel like you stand out.
Sometimes you gotta work a little so you can ball a lot.
Identity theft is not a joke, Jim. Millions of families suffer every year.
A lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
Michael! Oh, that's funny. Michael!
Heisenberg. You're goddamn right.
But it's always a good idea to demonstrate to your coworkers that you are capable of withstanding a tremendous amount of pain.
The Lannisters send their regards.
Staring at this board for days.
Mac, half the employees in this building have been made up. This office is a goddamn ghost town.
Dracarys.
Welcome back to another episode of Red and Red Real Reviews, episode 13 of Baker's Dozen.
Whoa, I just realized something crazy. Not to ruin the surprise, but later in the show, we're going to talk about numbers. And you know how 13 is a weird number? We're on episode 13 for this one. I didn't realize how weird that is. Right?
Yeah. Well, so this is an interesting one, and we'll touch on it towards the end. I thought this was going to be a limited series, Three-Body Problem, on Netflix, and turns out it's not. It's an ongoing series, but we had a little back and forth deciding what to cover because you're not exactly the sci-fi fan. Kind of get bored from it. Strikes blow to my heart as that is. And where this show has its sci-fi elements, it's not really the whole theme. There's a bit of mystery. There's a bit of science and like just straight science and principles like that. A little bit of government organizational structure going on. So how did your preconceived notions of this show change as you started to watch it?
I mean, I think when I'm thinking of sci-fi, this didn't really seem like textbook sci-fi because I've had to deal with a lot of sci-fi. I've dated a lot of sci-fi fans and been made to watch a lot of movies and hear about a lot of books that are sci-fi related. So a lot of times those tend to be like the dystopian kind of futuristic alternate universe kind of things. And I didn't really feel like this. I mean, yes, it had some kind of elements of sci-fi, but it didn't seem like legitimate sci-fi to me, which was a good thing for me. And I found it interesting. I know this is based off of books, and I kind of felt like I hadn't really seen anything, at least, maybe because I don't have a wide breadth of knowledge as far as sci-fi in the media, but I didn't feel like it was a story that had really been told before in this way. I kind of found it to be a unique story. And when they mentioned in the very beginning, I think it was the first 5 or 10 minutes, they mentioned like a particle accelerator, the one in Oxford or something. And I was like, oh, dear Lord, here we go. Because I've actually heard that term. I used to watch the Flash TV show, so
Oh,
I was
oh
like, okay,
no.
I know what a particle accelerator is, and I was like, ugh, I mean, there were parts where things were very complicated and very like I don't know anything about physics. I don't know anything about quantum physics or any of that kind of stuff. So I was a little intimidated by just the knowledge and all this like heavy science in it, but otherwise I ended up generally liking it. And I mean, it didn't take very many episodes. Within an episode or two, I was pretty intrigued.
Also never considered the CW to, like, as far as going to the well for quality sci-fi content.
Right. I mean, it's they do what they can with the special effects, but I don't know how much they have in the budget.
Yeah. How do you think it compared to Bodies, our last Netflix show we covered, as far as is this sci-fi, is it not?
Yeah, I think just that element of kind of time and
Mhm.
but with this it was a lot more realistic. Like I think that the story of Three Body Problem actually could happen. I mean, everything was very scientifically based. You know, even the communication with the Santi, like it was like, you know, they said at some point it was almost 400 years, like as far as when they were gonna like they're leaving now, but they're not gonna get here for another 400 years. So
Mhm.
that was very realistic in the time of like, okay, it's not just gonna happen now. Communication is an instant, you know. Those elements were realistic and could I think actually happen.
Yeah, and on top of that, the realism factor was probably also helped by the fact that the majority, well, all the story really took place in modern times,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to something by comparison to Bodies, which is just one section of the story in modern times and they're jumping around. This was pretty much a modern show with these kind of futuristic elements.
Right. It didn't have so many timelines. It wasn't as they did have the flashback period to in China, the
Yeah,
earlier in the 1969 or something like that. So
yeah.
they did
But
have that flashback, but
it's easier to pull off going backwards than going forwards because at least backwards we know that because it's history. We've seen that.
right, right. So it didn't seem as complicated as far as the timeline. And, you know, Bodies had that whole crime element to it. You know, you're trying to solve or you're trying to see what happens with a case through time. This was kind of a drama, sort of
Yeah,
a drama outside from the sci-fi elements.
right. And it's kind of following oddly enough a lot of it because of the writer producers of the show. It's got a track record from Game of Thrones, which obviously, apart from the very end of the show, has a highly regarded reputation of being quality programming. So David Benioff and DB Weiss, if I'm pronouncing the former's name correctly, uh, they were highly involved in producing this show as well as Game of Thrones. And in typical Taylor Sheridan, Christopher Nolan type of fashion, they brought in some of their good old days holdovers from the previous shows. So we'll rip through one at a time. I mean, the first one I think of was Liam Cunningham,
Mm-hmm.
formerly known as Sir Davos from Game of Thrones, plays Wade, who is a main character, but not the heralded main character of the show. He's this director of this scientific uh, government agency of sorts that winds up being the head of this space travel resistance force. And I mean, Davos is one of my more favorable characters from Thrones, so it was good to see him.
Yeah, I enjoyed that was another parallel between Game of Thrones and this show was that in both shows I liked him. I liked him as Wade, I liked him as Sir Davos. I generally liked their characters. I did feel like both of those characters what they had in common was that they were pretty level-headed and they'll kind of just do what's necessary. They'll do whatever it takes to do what they need to do when it gets down to brass tacks.
make the hard choices, as we learn he winds up having kind of a butting of heads scenario with Augie over
Yeah.
things.
Hmm.
But definitely without emotion making those types of decisions.
Yeah, he's very firm on what he wants. He'll get in there and do what needs to be done. He doesn't care, at what cost. He's like, this is happening.
And another one which was quite the slimy character in Game of Thrones. And thank you for your off-air correction. The Red Sparrow, played by Jonathan Pryce. He returns to play this character Mike Evans in Three Body Problem, and he serves as this character, kind of a bit of a side character, but a very playing a
Hmm.
very prominent role in the story itself. Where he was one of the catalysts back in the 60s when the Santi first made contact, and he and Ye1G uh developed this relationship because they both have this, I don't want to say controversial, but this outside the box
Hmm.
interpretation of the world, of society, and then their reaction to the Santi's presence or incoming presence.
Right. They had the same worldview, sort of, right? So they had the same perception. So, I mean, yeah, he kind of was a slimy character in this too. But what I did, of course, I didn't know if it was the High Sparrow or the Red Sparrow. I was confused as to what his name was. At first I was
Oh,
like Red Sparrow, and then I was like, is that right?
maybe I was right after all.
I think you're right. I don't know why I had Red Sparrow in my mind, but I knew who he was. I was like, the Sparrow guy from Game of Thrones. I knew exactly who he was.
Mhm.
He also played Jonathan Pryce. I was like, that's the guy that played the Pope, wasn't it? There was a Netflix movie
Oh, yeah. Yep.
3 or 4 years
Yep.
ago about the changing of the Pope, and he
Yep.
played. I don't even remember which. Was it Benedict? I don't remember which of the popes he played, but I recognized him from that too.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of that, but I know exactly which film you're talking about. There was like several different popes in in the Vatican,
Yeah. Yep.
or not several different popes, several different cardinals, I
It
should
was
say.
like the two that the one that retired and the one that stepped in. I don't remember which one he was.
Yeah, talk about being typecast. He fits into this like old man English proper type of thing, but they keep casting him as these dirty characters.
Yeah, he was a little bit scuzzy, right? Because wasn't he just kind of in this, wasn't he kind of just like a rich guy who's like, okay, well, I'm just because I have money, I'm just gonna do all this stuff that I want to do because I'm gonna fulfill what I think of the world and what needs to be done.
Which is funny because when he's a young man with the A1G, he is very much this like kind of hippie activist type of character. So
Right.
like, however, over the years he came to money and wealth, he still he I don't know if he kind of felt like he lost a little bit of that activist persona as a young man, or if he was just fulfilling the goals of his youth now that he's got some cheese behind him.
I think from what I took from the story is that his family was, I think he was born into money, right? And
Mm-hmm.
to me it kind of seems like, how kids that are really rich want to have a purpose, like they don't want to accept that, oh well, I'm not just rich and shallow, like there's more to me than that. So I
Yeah.
think that's why he got into the activism, to be like, well, I want to do something with my money, like I don't want to just be some surface level rich guy, I want to be something more.
Yeah, and in typical stereotypical fashion, he winds up backdooring himself into awkward situations. Like, well, I guess you really weren't this altruistic person anyway.
Yeah.
How do you botch that Little Red Riding Hood scene? I have no idea. Like, as far as not in terms of acting, obviously, but in terms of the communication with the Santi. Oh yeah, I
I
guess you
know.
why.
I know the communication with the Santi, like I was just kind of like cringing, like with every interaction. I was just like, he would say something just like, we don't understand that. And it's just like, oh
Yeah,
dear, this can't go well.
yeah.
It just,
how do you not predict they're not going to understand this? It's Little Red Riding Hood. It's not exactly the most realistic story.
Yeah, I know. There's some it's like we question ourselves some elements of that story. Like, yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. This little girl blind. She doesn't know doesn't know a wolf's her grandmother. Anyway, and another one, I guess the last one, well, we got one more, but not necessarily Thrones related, but the one you were particularly excited about is the lovable Sam Tully, from
Yes.
Game of Thrones, portrayed by John Bradley. He returns as Jack Rooney, one of the scientists, and he's kind of the black sheep of this scientist group of friends.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I saw they were advertising his name as one of the main, or John Bradley. They were advertising him as one of the main features of this show on Netflix. He's one of the first three names that's listed.
Hmm.
So they're very clearly like, remember, this is this guy from Game of Thrones. So that was the draw for like I knew that. So I was like, when you said like, oh, let's cover this show, I was like, okay, it's got Sam Tully in it. I think, he had a quirky, funny character and lovable character in Game of Thrones. So I did enjoy his performance in this because he was kind of something similar. It was just in modern times. He was kind of quirky. He was the sense of humor in the show, and I just wish his character had stuck around longer because I not like it all went to hell when he was gone, but I don't know, it just missed some of the sparkle because he had so much of the comedic relief that.
And he had good relationships with several of the other scientists as well. Or, obviously all of them because they're all close friends, but like it was very prominently noticed throughout his episodes.
Right. And he did have a lot of money and he was a rich guy, but I didn't feel like he was using his money or his business in the wrong way. It was kind of like, well, I have all this money, so I'm going to give you guys things that you could never dream of. Like, I want to pay for a trip to go to this beach house, or, he wanted to pay for things and he was always showing them like, oh, we got these snacks. Oh, do you want some of these? Like, he was always trying to. And it wasn't like he was bragging about his wealth. He wanted to share it with his friends. And I think above it all, he was a decent guy.
Yeah. In any event, it's darn good marketing because Netflix knew that people love Sam, so let's push Sam.
Yes.
And then the other one, although this is not a Thrones character, although for all I know, I could be mistaken and he was a side character somewhere, but he's certainly not where I know. Thrones is certainly not where I know him from, and that's Benedict Wong of Marvel fame in the Doctor Strange and the Avengers, and I played a bit of a comic relief character in those films. I guess he's a little bit of a comic relief in this as well. He plays Clarence, one of the lead detective and working underneath Wade's organization. So, and he was a very interesting arc in this, and again, another nice familiar face to see. But I think his character was pivotal to the story as well.
Right. He was very flawed, normal, regular guy who had his issues in his life, but he was very intelligent and very smart and was figuring things out. And I immediately recognized him. I was like, where do I know this guy from? I didn't think it was Game of Thrones, but I was like, where is this guy from? I could not figure it out. So I didn't get that Marvel connection. I think I could have looked it up, but I think he had a very vast filmography. So I don't even know that I saw Doctor Strange like anywhere close to the top because he just has so many projects going on.
That would seem odd to me because to me, that's his biggest one. And to me, that's the one where he became a household name just because of the success and popularity of Marvel.
Yeah, but that was already 2 or 3 years ago that the last Strange movie was, or the last movie he was in, I think. So, I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff, including this. So, yeah, I immediately recognized him, but I enjoyed his character.
Yeah, and like you said, flawed character trying to figure things
Yeah.
out. I mean, even as figuring out his relationship with his son, which was
Yes,
like a very minor storyline, but still kind of significant in his arc.
that's exactly what I was referring to by the
Yeah,
flawed behavior.
yeah. Now there's a bit of, we'll call it a numbers game going on in this, and the obvious is scientific format when you think of testing theories. Science, obviously, a very numeric field.
Mm.
So you can kind of insinuate that there's a very calculable uh, characteristic, for lack of a better word, to Augie's nanofiber technology, Jin's calculations when she launches Will's brain capsule into
Mhm.
space, especially when she and Raj kind of have their, I guess, their breakup moment, and he walks into the back of the plane, and she's like, "Do you have any idea if this is even the slightest bit off?"
Mm.
Plus her little back and forth with weight over the seeds, like, "Oh, it's only 18 grams. This could throw off the whole thing." Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then you have the countdown, which is burned in the sky, which is mostly Augie that sees that.
Hmm.
But this countdown thing that's a very prominent visual earlier in the show, uh, and that kind of lost a little bit of steam throughout the show, being that it
Yes.
was so prominent early on.
Hmm.
And the one that stuck out in my head the most was, ironically enough, to our earlier little oddity of our show, 13, because when Yang and Ye Wenji were trying to figure out what this communication was coming from the stars, they said 13, because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it was the difference was 13 minutes of getting the signal from America to Jupiter, or this moon of Jupiter, versus getting the same signal there from China. And then that 13 came back around later on when Jin and Jack are playing the virtual reality game, and there's 13 million soldiers for this abacus thing that
Mm.
they devise as a communication uh, aspect to communicate with the sun, or Tanti, or figure out what this deal with the suns is going on. And I thought that was interesting because 13 kind of has an eerie popular culture
Right.
vibe to it, Friday the 13th, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't notice the 13 reference. I saw your notes and I didn't really realize that until you mentioned it. And it's just even more kooky that this is the 13th episode. It's like lucky and unlucky 13. Like,
Yes.
which way is it? I honestly did not think that until you said it. So that's what's kind of weird, but you are completely right in the sense that the numbers thing was a very big concept. And then it was like once Auggie figured out that she needed to walk away from it in order to get the numbers to stop, then it was like it just dropped. But to me, it kind of reminded me of Lost, the show, because remember the numbers thing that they had to hit the button or whatever it was.
I don't, because I didn't watch Lost.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot. I forgot. So anyway, it reminded me of Lost in that way, like, having this weird concept of like, oh, why are these numbers appearing and what do we do to make it stop, or, whatever it is. And so they had to come up with this reason for why that occurs and, all this stuff. So I actually looked up Lost because it made me think of it. And I was like, you know what? I was like, are these same showrunners? Did they have anything to do with Lost? No, they didn't. But I did look it up to verify.
Do you imagine if the show was the brainchild of Game of Thrones and Lost? They're all the same people.
It would be very, you haven't watched it, but it would be very complicated and your questions would take years and seasons to be answered. So luckily that's not the case.
Well, yeah. Well, in a certain sense, that wouldn't be a bad thing because it would keep viewers engaged. And it's because the thing I always heard about Lost was the fact that when it starts off, it's great and you're engaged in it. But
Yep.
after that, it's just they just keep stringing you along. You're like, why am I watching this awful show?
Yeah, it's you question there are actually a couple things I think that they never really answered
Which
at
is
all.
terrible. I mean, you think of the things that we are so irritated about the way Thrones ended. Like I can't even on that, but at least Thrones didn't leave a lot of things open ended. We just didn't like the way they closed them. I can't imagine being so upset at a show ending that I invested so much of my life into and having nothing answered by the time it was over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to ruin anything for anyone if they haven't watched it. I mean, it granted it was like 20 years ago,
Yeah.
so not like I can say spoilers, but just saying I don't think they ever explained the polar bears. That's all I'm gonna say. I don't think anything ever explained that. So I'm still a little butthurt about that.
Well, hopefully 13 is more lucky than unlucky for us in this
I hope
episode.
so.
Blows up to a couple thousand views or something.
Yeah. But we have that nice little 13 reference. And when you were talking about how numbers kind of drive the scientific format and they drive everything, wasn't there a line I was laughing because I think it was Jack on a video call with Jin, maybe? I don't remember which two characters it was, but they were on a video call and she was talking about the video game and she was trying to think of something. So she goes in the background and she just starts scribbling on her whiteboard. And he's like, "Wait, you have a whiteboard at your house?" Like,
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I thought that was funny because it was these characters are all like scientists, and it was just funny that one scientist, who kind of branched off and did his own thing, like as an entrepreneur, was shocked that one of the scientists had, this whiteboard in her house that she could just randomly scribble, equations on there.
Yeah. The science is part of their personality. There's not like
Yes,
a work-life balance separation.
very much.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on in this show as far as details and timelines to kind of follow along. It's definitely not the show that you can watch passively and doom scroll.
No.
So there were a couple things that when the dots connected, they kind of, gave you that
Yeah.
mind blown effect. So we'll talk a little bit about shock factor, wow moments that may have occurred. To me, it was kind of how the relationship, how Mike Evans and Ye Wen-ji become known in the modern times. I think Mike Evans, once they establish who he is in the 60s, you kind of realize that right away. But Ye Wen-ji, you don't really realize who she is in the modern time until that little invite only thing. So all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's the chick's mom,
Right.
their teacher that died at the beginning of the show. And then on top of that, you then later realize that Vera was their daughter, which you see
Yes.
them get it on towards the end of the show. So it's like, oh well, there's where Vera came from. And so not only do you realize that, like, oh my God, that she was their kid, but then you realize that Yi Wan-ji kept her a secret from Mike Evans the whole time.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the little girl in the video game modeled after Vera?
I didn't think of that. I didn't connect the dots there, but it very well could have been.
Because didn't they have a flashback where they show what is her name?
Ye Wan-ji.
Yeah, Ye Wan-ji, where they show her younger and they show that little girl. And I was like, that's the little girl from the game that Jin was like, save me, help me.
And it kind of makes sense because I think towards the end, Ye Wan-ji discloses, I can't remember whether it's to Jin or Saul. Well, it wasn't to Jin, but whether it was to Saul or to Tatiana all the way at the end, where she kind of felt like she couldn't, like Vera was kind of off on her own and she tried to shield her from so much and she couldn't. So that theory would kind of lend credence to her relationship, or at least mental relationship, with her daughter, or she couldn't save her.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by that. That was one thing that sort of made me, I mean, it was like a little bit shocking to find out that Mike Evans was Vera's dad. But another thing that they kind of dropped the ball with, in my opinion, or like they didn't make us care about it. I mean, Vera died within the first 5 minutes of the show, right? We don't know Vera as a character. We only know like her friends from being like, oh, Vera was this and Vera was that, and what her mom says about her. But we don't know her as a character, so we don't really care about her as a character. You know what I mean? It's weird to find out that this Mike Evans is her father, and to not have any feelings as a viewer as to like, oh, well, that's terribly sad that this girl grew her whole life not knowing who her father was, and you know, the extent of who her father was, you know, this weird man. So
especially because the two of them, Wanji and Mike Evans, were so interconnected through their journey early on, that you like what could have possibly happened to make them break off, and for her to keep him from his child.
And yeah, they didn't really reveal that, did they? And so
I don't know. I don't recall that at all.
No, so I was you know, that was another thing, is why wouldn't she reveal that was her father? And like, not to sound uncaring, but like, why should we care? Because we didn't know Vera, you know?
Right.
It just we weren't invested in it.
Yeah, we were invested enough either on the effect she had on the scientists, and invested enough in this story of Ye Wanji, especially as it becomes known that she's behind this sick, twisted virtual reality game.
Right.
We're invested enough in these parts of Vera to care about Vera, where you're right, if it's just about her herself, we shouldn't care because she's only in 5 minutes of the show.
Right. So I think I guess it wasn't really shocking to me that Vera's dad was Mike Evans. I think it was more like, you know, when you were talking about this topic, it's wow moments, but it's also putting two and two together. And when you think about it, you're like, oh, that makes sense, because those two were tight back then. That makes sense that Vera was Mike Evans' child. Like, it's just kind of things clicking. It wasn't really surprising to me. I guess that's the distinction I should make.
Which is a testament to the writing and producing the show, is the fact that you can follow it, even though you have to be super engaged and pay attention, you could follow the lineage of the show and nothing seems out of place.
Right.
Well, here we,
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, here we are halfway through the show, and we haven't talked about any of the main characters. So let's change that right quickly. And we'll go through each one by one, because we'll use this as our film student sesh of the episode. And each one of these scientists is such a big impact on the show. So Jin is a hugely important part of the show, because she's the one that's super invested in figuring out what this virtual reality game is all about and how to advance past it. So my take of Jin, she's extremely smart. She's extremely driven. She's owned by a sense of duty to her career, to her friends. And part of me is almost thinking that's a tie to her Asian heritage, because I feel, I don't want to assume, but I feel like her character is meant to be Chinese. And that duty is obviously a huge duty, and honor is obviously a huge part of Chinese culture.
Yeah, she and the actress too, I'm wondering what she was from. To me, she was sort of like, she just had a lot of integrity, but you're right. She's driven very much by her career. She's driven by her sense of duty. And those things are what rules her life. Not relationships, bonds, things like that don't really come first. I mean, she does have a very close friendship with Auggie,
Mhm.
That kind of is her main relationship in her life, but she kind of was the Mulan of this show. I mean, she
Yes.
does have a sense of duty, a sense of honor, and but something that I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind the whole time was, you know what? She is a woman that is always going to choose her career. She's a career woman. She's probably going to go through life or end her life being alone
Yeah.
because of that.
Yeah, and that could even come full circle with this unrealized love that she had for Will. Obviously, Will was
Yeah.
extremely uh known aware of his love for Jin, but she didn't, but
Mm,
he could never tell her that, and we'll get into more of Will in a
right.
minute. But she didn't know this until it was too late. So that could,
Hmm.
to your point, that just now, that could almost come back to haunt her in future seasons of the show.
Yes. Yeah, it could.
The next, of course, is one we already touched on, and that is Jack, Jack Rooney. He is a very aloof character, yet very intelligent. He obviously came up through the same ranks as the other character, the other scientist, but he wasn't so much driven by science. He was more driven by what could science do for me, if you will, wealth, material possessions, and obviously he's successful in that. Hence his leaving school and starting this multi-million-dollar business of snacks or play toys or whatever the case may
I
be.
think wasn't it like snacks, beverages, things like that? But
It was
I
Frito
liked
Way.
I liked how he was constantly offering them like, oh, you want those crisps I have, or
Yeah. And you're like,
whatever it was.
why is this guy always giving them chips? And you're like, oh, well, it's his company, duh.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, he was really funny. I wish he had stuck around for longer. And I mean, yeah, we were saying he was the most featured actor up
Mhm.
front, for the show. And so that's why I was like, they're not gonna do anything. And
And
then I was kind of surprised when they killed him off because he was only in it for 3 or 4 episodes. And then I was like, really?
well, and it's funny. It's funny that you say that because the third episode was toward at the end of the third episode was when he was killed. And
Okay.
that was the first like moment. That was the first cliffhanger of the show. So like you're sitting there watching the show through the first 3 episodes, like, okay, it's interesting. I could follow it. Okay, I'm with it. I'm with it. And then that was the first like, okay, now I'm in it. Yeah, you have this character that we all know from
Right.
another role that everyone loves, and we're getting invested in him, and now he's gone. So like now you're in it. Now you're in the show because
Yeah,
now
you're like,
Jack's gone.
wait, you're like the
And
the
and
nerve.
the nerve. and and to top that off, that was also, I think, a moment in the rest of the character show that clicked light bulbs on, and they realized, okay, something's going on. These scientists around the globe aren't killing themselves because they could see on camera he's up against a glass wall, and Clarence is in his squad car on a
Yeah.
Sting. He's watching the whole thing. He sees that Tatiana's not up there, uh, so at least visibly. So that I think was kind of also the domino effect towards the other characters starting to piece things together.
Right. And it also, that moment happened, like it kind of went from 0 to 60 real fast. Cause at first, he and Jin met with Tatiana, wasn't it? They meet with Tatiana?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
And she was asking them to do something, and he's like, respectfully, I'm gonna get out of here. And he like, I mean, he like told her off kind of, but like, I wasn't expecting anything. And then I think the next scene it showed, Tatiana in his place, and I was like, he's gonna get killed. I
Yeah.
knew it the second that but it was like, you weren't suspecting that he was gonna get killed because like it was a very it was a very respectful, like, no, thank you. And then like they just are like they butcher him. So it's like,
They had to keep people engaged in this game, which is weird because Jin was already super engaged in it. You'd think like, oh, who cares if one person doesn't want to play?
yeah.
Next up, of course, is Auggie. And she's one that very interesting. committed, she's driven, she's intelligent. I mean, really at the same level of any other one of her friends, but she's also got this altruistic value where this sense of right or wrong, as you put it, off air, and where she has this breakaway from the group where they go on to continue to work with Wade and Raj, and based on the events of the Panama Canal and the collateral damage from destroying the Judgment Day, the ship, she kind of is like, that's it, I'm done, I'm not doing this, and that leads to, of course, what she does with her research as far as giving it out into society. So like I found myself drawn towards Auggie most probably of all of them.
Yeah, I feel like if I were a character on this show, I would be most like Auggie, because she's kind of one of those people that's not willing to compromise on her morals, and so she'll tell someone off if she has to be like, nope, this isn't right for me, nope, I'm not doing that. You know, she's going to do what she needs to do to succeed, and she's pretty stubborn. So I was like, okay, I am Auggie, Auggie is me.
Yeah. And it's funny, there's a lot of conflict in her too, because she obviously is, like you said before, she is very close with Jin, and Jin comes to the cottage because she needs Auggie for the staircase project. And she doesn't want to do it, but she still does it out of loyalty to Jin.
Right.
And at the same time, this kind of ongoing former lover scenario with Saul thing where you could tell they still kind of care about each other, but
yes,
their lives are just going in such opposite directions that you kind of feel like they're not going to work, even though deep down inside they probably want it to work, but they're kind of external I don't want to say qualifiers, but they're kind of external desires don't allow them to work.
Right. They're two ships passing in the night. It's just not the right timing. They both have strong feelings for each other, but you can just tell that it's not going to work out because they're just going in two separate directions.
Yeah. Well, speaking of emotions, let's turn on the waterworks. The I guess sad part of the main characters is Will, because early on you learn that he's got pancreatic cancer. Anyone who knows anyone that's been touched by that disease knows that's kind of the automatic killer of all cancers. And Will is an interesting character because he is very highly regarded by his friends as being intelligent, capable, but he is none of that looking at himself. And he's got this unwavering loyalty and devotion to his friends, especially to Jin, because of this soulmate love that he's got for her. So, like, Will's someone that, even though he's obviously gone by the end of the show and floating out in space on top of it, you still, so you know he's not coming back. You knew he wasn't going to be a long-standing character in the show anyway, because that cancer diagnosis came so early. But you still kind of felt invested in him because of this lack of confidence he had in himself. You just kind of feel for him.
Yeah, and I think he was a sympathetic character, but more so in my mind, he was a tragic character because his whole life he doesn't speak up, he doesn't advocate for himself, you know, in everything he does. Yeah, I think he was the only one that wasn't working in the science field anymore, right? He was,
but he was a teacher. He was
that's
a professor.
what it was. Okay, so he kind of went a different route than the rest of them. And I mean, when it comes to Jin, he just really suffered. Like, he suffered with this love for her for years, ever since he knew her. So it was just, you know, and then he's diagnosed with cancer. So it's like, it was just tragic because he, you know, here's someone that has no self-worth and never got a chance really to be who they wanted to be, or to do what they wanted to do, or to be with who they wanted to be with, because they never advocated for themselves. And it's sad that like those self-esteem issues really inhibited his life.
Advocacy as well as a sense of fight, because he's not willing to fight for his career. He's not willing to fight for telling Jin how he feels. He's not willing to fight the cancer. He just kind of exists, you know.
And I don't know if Jack or somebody makes a reference to that. Don't they say like, you're just going to give up?
Jack does. Yeah, Jack does.
When he says like, listen, let's get you to Sweden. We'll get you the best Swiss doctors or whatever it was. And he was willing to throw all the money he had at the situation for treatment. And he was like, why are you giving up? Like, let's do something. And Will's just like, nope, not doing it.
Saul said that as well towards the end. I'm like, you've got all this money now. What are you doing?
Yeah, because did he inherit
it was Jack's money.
Jack's?
It was
okay,
Jack's
that's what
money.
I thought.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Saul.
Nice segue there.
That's right. Completely unintended. He's the first one you meet, because you meet him right before Vera dies. And he's multiple times. I think Vera says it once. I think one of his friends says it once. And Ye Wen-ji says it towards the end. He is referenced as the smartest in the group. But he has this kind of no drive, lack of passion to do the same things they're doing. And he even says, like, I did physics because I was good at it, but I have no love for it. I have no passion for it. So he's just kind of like he's in this field, the same field as them, just kind of keep the lights on. It's a job. I'm good at it.
Right.
But he is kind of this, I don't want to necessarily say conscientious objector of sorts to his role in waging against the Santi, but he's a cynic at heart, and you're kind of intrigued by him because it's like everyone is so enthralled with this guy's capabilities, and he just doesn't want anything of it.
Right. It was almost like you get the sense that people are vocalizing the fact that he has wasted potential. Like, oh, you could be so much more, but he just had no interest in it.
And it's a little subtle, but you also notice he's the only one. I mean, obviously, other than Jack, who never finished school, but Saul's the only one that doesn't have a doctorate. Like everyone else, Dr. Salazar, Dr. Chung,
right,
Dr. Downing, but Saul is just Mr. Durand, as you know, he's addressed in front of the United Nations. So he's also the only one that kind of, even though he was on the same path as them, he just didn't pursue that extra level of education. Even though he's apparently got this brain to beat all of them.
Right. That's the ironic thing. It's almost like, it doesn't matter if you go to college or if you have a doctorate or if you have a master's. It's more of what you do with your brain or what you can do with your brain. That's most important.
Yeah. And I don't know whether it's something that he doesn't want to. Doesn't want to do more things with his brain, or he like just doesn't have any interest in it. Like, oh, I know what I could do, but
I think it's that he doesn't have any interest. I mean, towards the beginning, I sort of got the impression that he was sort of a partier, sort of a man-thrower. But to that point, I never was annoyed by his character. I never was like, Saul, get it together. Like, you're so annoying.
Yeah, he didn't come off as sleazy or living a dirtbag's life. He's just like, I'm just gonna live life and enjoy life, I guess, and all the vices that go with it.
Right. And you know what? I have to say, I was not even like 1% annoyed by any of these characters, which is kind of rare.
That's true.
Isn't that rare? I mean, in most shows, I'm just like, oh, this one character, like, shut the hell up, please. But I did not have that at all. Like with someone like, so I don't want to judge, but like, I see the woman who plays Auggie is a woman called Isa Gonzalez. And she is basically known. She was in Baby Driver. She was also known as dating Liam Hemsworth when he broke up with Miley Cyrus one of those times. So, I mean, I kind of had going into it, I'm like, oh, she's not the best actress. Like, she has this reputation. And I was kind of going into it not liking that actress. And I like the character didn't annoy me at all. It was actually the character I identified the most with. So, I mean, that was a testament to the writing, I think. I think it was great character development in the writing.
Yeah, well, you know what? Shame on Liam Hemsworth because that's a big step up from Miley Cyrus, and he's out kicking his coverage, and then he just says, "Oh, whatever, she's not the good actress." Like, dude, well, if anything, let's question his decision-making skills.
Well, so he married Miley Cyrus after that, and then they got divorced. So I wonder if he's kicking himself about Isa Gonzalez.
Well, he better be because she was smoking. is smoking.
And she's actually surprisingly a decent actress. Who knew?
Yeah. And so I think I know what we're both going to say, but which of the five did you find to be the most virtuous of the crew? Because they all kind of have this different arc of virtuosity, so you kind of have to decide which one's sense of doing the right thing, so to speak, is the correct interpretation of doing the right thing.
I think for me, it was a tie between Auggie and Saul because I feel like neither of them can be bought. Like they are the people that will do what they're going to do or what's true to them and their character till the end. So Saul rejects that position he's been nominated to. He doesn't feel like he deserves it. He doesn't feel like he belongs. He's not into things for any sort of fame, recognition.
And he doesn't want it.
Right. He doesn't want it. And it's the same thing with Auggie because she actually lets her, in order to make the numbers stop, she lets her career go down the toilet. She's got this nanofiber technology. And she actually, this was something that bothered me, that it was a plot hole that, and I guess we wouldn't have the show if she had said something, but when the board members or her boss or whoever are like, why are you doing this? Why aren't you working on the nanofiber shit or whatever it is?
Yeah.
You know, she's like, she doesn't say anything. And like, why isn't she like, oh, I had to stop because, you know, and go into the, like, be like, this sounds crazy, but like, why didn't she say anything? And maybe that's just like a show or a movie device. Like, we wouldn't have the progression of the story if people like volunteer the information that other people should know, just as an FYI. But I mean, with all that being said, at the end, wasn't she in some third world country using her nanofiber technology for
purify water?
Yeah.
Purify their water, yeah.
Dysentery.
Yeah, so which I've never heard dysentery, I think Oregon Trail.
Dysentery. So she's really using her intelligence. She's using this technology for good. So I think, you know, her and Saul are the ones that are just like, okay, I'm not in it for the fame, the fortune. I'm just going to do what I think is right and what is true to me.
Yeah. And I would agree. I would agree with either one. The only other thing I would say for Jin to be in contention for that like high virtuosity, we have to see how this series plays out. We have to see if she is justified in her aid to Wade's program. We have to see what the Santi really want with Earth. Do they have the best intentions, or are they just coming to conquest? We would have to see how that plays out in order to find out if Jin is justified in her actions, or if it's gonna be like a Auggie sitting there, I told you so.
Right. And do you think after the Project Staircase failed, what do you think is to come for Wade and Jin? What do you think Wade whispered to her?
I think it was probably comforting because he knew about the star. He's the one that told her about the star,
right.
And she immediately rushed to the hospital to try and catch Will. So I think he knew what they meant to each other, even if they didn't, or at least what she meant to Will. So I think it was something probably comforting, but to
Yeah.
that point, I think the failure of Staircase is going to motivate Jin even more to
Yes.
devise another way to accomplish the same goal. Because
Mm.
because Will, here we are with nobody, we haven't said anything about Will's virtuosity. He's someone as tragic as he is. Everything he does was for something else or someone else.
Right.
So, I mean, isn't that the ultimate definition of virtue or selflessness?
Yeah, and I think that's that's the part of the tragic thing too is he, sacrifices himself in the name of science. Even though he knows
Right.
he's going to die because of the cancer, he still takes it that
Yeah.
step further and thinks about, is so selfless in that moment of him on his deathbed.
And he says that to Saul. He's like, they're running over, like, well, what about this? What about if things go that way? What about things go this way? And he's like, well, if things go X, Y, and Z, I'm dead. If things go A, B, and C, I'm still dead anyway.
Yeah.
Any way you cut it, I'm still gonna die.
Right.
So, so to wrap things up, we there wasn't a lot left unfulfilled as far as the season in isolation of itself. And granted, this is not a limited series; it's going to be an ongoing series, at least hopefully. I mean, there were rumors of being renewed. I guess it's not official, but at least that was in the plans. And obviously, the way they ended the last episode, it would lend to the fact that they want to do that. The only thing I really found that was an open question was Tatiana's role. I thought she was Edith for most of the show because all these scenes she's not visible on camera. So I'm thinking she's a spirit or something. She's a ghost, and she meets Clarence in the graveyard when he's visiting his wife's grave, and she goes over another grave, and the headstone says Edith something. It has a very small span of life dates wise on it, and it says Our Little Angel. So I'm thinking, oh, she died as a child, and she's kind of operating in this spirit as a spirit to influence humanity's relationships with the Santi. And obviously, as the show continues, you start to put pieces together. It's like, is she really dead or not? Like she gets shot at the invite only event. And she starts having interactions with more and more characters. So it's like, okay, they all can't be what's the word, mediums. They all can't be mediums. So
Right.
Like I'm a little unfulfilled about what her deal is, but other than that, I really wasn't left wondering a lot at the end of the show.
I wonder if maybe in the next seasons maybe they'll have a flashback that's a backstory of why she started working for the Santi or how her relationship developed with them. But yeah, I think she's just really a right hand woman on Earth for them to do things. And the thing with her being on camera footage and things like that, I think the Santi have technology that they gave her or used for her to be able to like erase her from footage and things like that. But yeah, she's immortal. It's just, how did she come to start working for them? That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah, why
we
you?
don't know.
You're
why
obviously more than just one of these hired guns, like the shooter, like Saul's shooter.
Right. And at the end, is it Sofan? I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
They say to her, she's in like her RV or whatever she lives in, right? Towards the end, and they're like, Tatiana, you've really proven yourself. Like, we think it's time to take it up a notch. Like,
Here's a headset.
So Tatiana gets a promotion. She's working for the Santi.
Yeah.
She gets a promotion.
Well, that being said, I did look at the ratings of each episode, and they were pretty low, which is a little concerning. I hope that doesn't affect the renewal because I would like to see where this story goes.
Really? You thought they were low?
They were low. On an IMDb, they're low.
The show in general had, I think, like a 7.7 or almost an 8, which was pretty good, and it's been in the top 10. It's been in the top 10 on IMDb, so I think it's definitely has more story left to be told. And what I read is that, yes, it is not greenlit yet, but the plan is for up to 4 seasons. So that would be another 3 seasons. I'm assuming that since the Santi are like 400 years away or just under that each season would be like 100 years. Maybe each season is like a generation or something. And it does get you thinking about life on other planets, and it gets you thinking about all that crazy stuff. But I would be willing to give season 2 a shot if they renew it, which I assuming they will. But the only thing is, after Jack was offed, I kind of feel like the pacing of the last, there were 8 episodes? The pacing of the last half of the first season seemed to be kind of a lot more drawn out. Like, I don't want to say that it was boring or slow, but it just, the pacing was a lot different and then in the first 3 or 4 episodes. So it kind of lost me a little bit. Certain concepts tapered off a little bit. Like, it wasn't so like hard hitting with certain things. And the humor went because Jack died. So I don't know. So, it wasn't super consistent the whole season. It wasn't like super intriguing the whole season. But that said, by the time we got to the last episode, I think there's enough there that leaves me interested in wanting to give the second season a chance.
Yeah. And if there are more seasons, if it is renewed, we'll be sure to cover them right here. If you like listening to our show, we would very, very much appreciate a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And you can listen to our show on those platforms in addition to Google Podcasts and iHeartRadio if you're on the go and want to listen to our musings. Or if you want to visualize and see our sparkly ginger physical personas, check us out on YouTube and Rumble as well. Follow us, my podcast cohort, Binge the Ginge, that is one word on TikTok, and dots between the words on Instagram. And myself, Nutmeg 2 Palmetto, that is the number 2 on both Instagram and TikTok. Until the next real review, let the inner dimension swirl. Red and Red, signing out.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind.
Hey guys, you ready to let the dogs out?
What?
Do what?
I'd like to be pimps from Oakland or cowboys from Arizona, but it's not Halloween.
Let the dogs out, like, who let the dogs out? Who brought this guy along?
Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and chum some of this shit.
Grow up, Peter Pan. Count Chocula.
X never, ever marks the spot.
One more thing. Do me a favor. Don't go chasing waterfalls.
You did. You crazy son of a bitch, you did.
Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
All right. Then you do us proud. Because I don't want no scrubs.
Don't act so surprised, Your Highness. You weren't on any mercy mission.
Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'll take care, all right? None but love for you. None but love for you.
10. X marks the spot.
Have any clue what's about to happen to him?
Oh, not a chance in hell. Good night.
Blow up! Peace!
Fire, you son of a...
Toodaloo, motherfucker.
Hey, ain't too proud to beg.
Come on.
What?
It's not funny anymore.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not trying to be...
references.
Still, nothing. I swear to you.
but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.